Let's go ahead and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask for your help at this time as we study your word, that we would grow in an understanding of what it is you want us to know about this, that we can see that very often our purpose and calling, it will take hardship being involved, because in the end you are much more concerned about our holiness than our happiness, and because of this, difficulties will arise that begin to hurt. And we're going to see today with your servant Paul, he was just following your will, but following your will led just to tension and just hardship one after another, simply by being faithful to you. And that's how you do it sometimes, because you care about the greater overall picture and not the simplicity of the small pieces. Jesus, help me tonight, Lord, to say what it is you want said. Holy Spirit, protect me from error or heresy. Lord, allow those that are here to learn, be illuminated in a supernatural way, remember the things they've studied, and have a greater understanding of the God they serve. Thank you for being who you are, Master. For your name we pray. Amen. What we are going to do, since we are moving in Acts more to a once a week right now, I don't know how I'm doing Sunday night still, I'm going to tie together last week with this week and kind of build off of it for next time, because we're going to get into a section where it's going to be very important for Luke the author. Now, typically when we go through Acts, what's the speed about the chapters? Normally, if you go through a couple of chapters, we can cover a week, 2 weeks, a year, you know. We can cover in 10 chapters, 20 years, you know. We're about to hit a lull between Acts 21 and Acts 23, beginning of 24. That's going to cover 12 days. And there's not like that. You don't see much of this in Acts, except from the beginning and here. When you do, you know it's important. And so that's why, to make sure you get it, we're going to build on it and show you what's going to happen is, Paul is inevitably going to make it to Jerusalem. Okay? When he gets to Jerusalem, he will be first off, we're good to go. Love your mission, Paul. But then they're going to talk about some zealous Jewish believers who are all about the law. And they have been hearing rumors, and it's important you understand how this is worded. They have been hearing rumors that Paul, when he's over in Gentile territories, has been teaching the Jews over there to no longer circumcise their children and to no longer obey the customs of Moses, the law and the daily life of Moses, okay? And on top of that, right now in Jerusalem, you're having a time of great political unrest. You're having a time of anti-Gentile sentiment because you hate the Romans, and you're having this time of a lot of Jews wanting to get back to their heritage. Okay, how can I say this? Well, you know, in modern times, I guess as white people, we don't really talk about our heritage as much. Maybe more minorities might. Okay, that's fine. They want to, that's fine. Well, this is something you got to understand the Jews are doing right now. They're saying, let's get back to our heritage and overthrow these Romans, and these Gentiles keep trying to, hold us back and hold us down, and they were. But in turn, what it's doing is it's making them want to go back to their roots, which in their roots is what? Circumcision, which was a sign of the covenant of God, and obeying the laws of Moses, which was the daily life that set them apart from other people, that made them their Jewish identity, its true Jewish identity. And now they're here in the midst of all this, that Paul is going against their Jewish heritage. Okay, whether it's true or not, that's what they're hearing. And when they hear this, how do you think they're going to feel about Paul? Keep in mind the political, social unrest that's going on, the desire to get back to your Jewish heritage and loyalty to your Jewish roots, and all of a sudden you got this Gentile movement when you're feeling anti-Gentile, led by this guy named Paul, who is doing what? In their minds, being told to forsake their Jewish heritage. How do you think that's going to go over with them?
Not going to play well with the crowd.
No, it's not. And inevitably, the Jerusalem council, the elders of the Christian church, they are going, at Jerusalem, they're going to try to smooth things over, and they're going to try to acquiesce to those believing Jewish Christians who are zealous for the law. Okay? Now, are they new Christians that are immature? Are they Christians that have come under the influence of teachers who are advocating the law? Well, we might not know that, but we know the social setting itself certainly adds flames to the fire. And in order to keep these thousands of Jews from rioting and keeping unity in the church, James, what James am I talking about? Remember, James the Apostle's dead, so what James are we talking about?
It's got to be Jesus'
brother. Jesus' brother. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. That's right. He is the leader of the elders in the Jerusalem church now. And he is going to ask Paul, he's going to say, hey man, can we smooth things over here by you showing them that you're cool with the Jewish law, you haven't forsaken your Torah roots, and that you're not telling Jews they have to stop being Jews in order to serve Christ. Remember back at the Acts 15 Apostolic Council, the big question was, do Gentiles have to be Jews to become Christians? Well, this question is, do Jews have to stop being Jews to become Christians? Well, yes and no. They cannot view the law as in any way appropriating favor with God, earning favor with God, contributing to their salvation in the sociological realm, and they cannot impose it on Gentiles. But do they, as Jews, have to stop living out the customs of the law and have to stop circumcision of their children? Do they have to? No, they have the right to do it. And so what the issue is here is how we're going to handle that and keep them from basically rioting at this point and killing you, Paul. Which in the end, he's going to go through this purification rite and he's forming with a Nazarite vow. And in the end, he's not going to make it very far. And a big group's going to find him and they are just going to beat the living snot out of him. It looks like something you see on TV when a mob mentality takes hold of a single individual and they're just all beating him to he almost can't live anymore. And inevitably what has to happen is the Romans have to get involved and save Paul. All this is going to come into play. Okay? This is going to be something I'll teach you at least twice. You need to hear that because how it plays out is going to be important. It gets misunderstood. Because at the heart of all this as well is going to be what's a theological topic on Paul's view of the law. When we talk about Paul's view of the law, it is, was he still a practicing Jew? Was he antinomian, which means anti-law? What were his views on the law themselves? This is stuff you write doctoral dissertations on. And we will ease our way into that. But for now, no, that is where we're moving towards. In the meantime, this is going to be the last section in Acts, and it's going to close things out. We're going to go to Jerusalem. He's going to get arrested, have several legal hearings. He's going to go to Caesarea and have some examinations. He's eventually going to appeal to Caesar, get moved to Rome. On his way to Rome, he's going to have a long sea voyage, and he's going to, this Malta situation, I'm going to save all that for you. And then he's inevitably going to await his imperial trial. The book of Acts ends. So we're closing things out to the last leg of the book of Acts itself. All of this comes into play with what's happening right now. Because this is going to set into motion how the book ends. And you've got to watch these dominoes fall one after another. See how all this plays out. So to begin with, let's kind of get our foundation here. We are back at the, remember, Paul has just given a speech to who? Who is the big speech in Acts 22?
The Ephesian elders.
The Ephesian elders. And where is this speech given at? It's not given in Ephesus. Where's it given at?
Ephesus.
Not at Ephesus.
No.
Close. Anybody want to guess? I butchered the name, so you say it right. I'm okay. Miletus. Yeah. Or Miletus is fine. If you say Miletus, Miletus, I don't care because I have butchered that one the whole time. It's Miletus though. And so they have this big, you give them this big speech, and within this speech you see the terms come out with elders and shepherding and bishops, and the job of an elder, particularly to guard against doctrinal error in the incoming from out and within of satanic teachings. That is the primary responsibility. And he said, be a man of financial integrity. He is to be someone who's not greedy but helps others. He's to be one of these kind of people. And so he leaves, and when they leave, you have this huge cheerful goodbye. And this is what's going to set the stage here. We'll quickly start back at just Acts 21, 1 through 3. We will start here, and I will see if you remember any of these fun places that we talked about and anything connected with them. I'll show them to you on the map quickly, and we will try. Well, we're going to get to verse 17 today. We're going to get to Jerusalem. We're going to stop there. Go ahead. Who's going to read today? Acts 21, 1 through 3. Who's the reader today? Who's going to step up? Steve, I guess that looks like it's you.
Y'all, please excuse me.
Hey, your name will be put on this video too, so don't worry.
I'm not a good public reader.
Do you want somebody else to do it? We can get somebody else if you want to.
I'll try it.
Okay.
Y'all just don't laugh too hard. Now it came to pass that when we had departed from them and set sail, running a straight course, we came to Kos. The following day to Rhodes, and from there to Patara.
Very good. Now, remember on this map, you guys were asking about it. That would be Kos. It's actually very close to inland right here, okay? Mm-hmm. That's going to be it. This is going to be Rhodes down here. Remember, Kos is where they grew a lot of wine, or made wine and ointments and things like that. And then we got Rhodes down here. Remember, at one time, it was the location of what?
One of the 7 worlds.
Yeah, the Helios statue. Yeah, to the harbor, which was destroyed by this point in time. But at this point, it had a medical center. And what was the medical center founder's name? And if no one gets it, I'll let Beth answer it. Because I'll say it my favorite way to say it. You remember, right, Beth? Okay, good. Anybody know it? All right, Beth, what is it? Thank you so much, Hippocrates. Thank you so much, Beth. We appreciate that. And then we're going on down here to Patara, just western Lycia. And now we're going to sail on down. This is where we got to get another big boat, because we're going to open seas now. Okay? And what we're going to pick up is one of your Alexandrian grain vessels. Where's Alexandria? Remember, Egypt. Very good. And so between Egypt and Italy, this thing's going to be transporting stuff. We got to get on that, and that's what's going to happen here. Go and read verse 2 and 3.
And finding a ship sailing over to Phoenicia, he went aboard and set sail. When we had sighted Cyprus, we passed it on the left and sailed to Syria and landed at Tyre. For the ship was to unload her cargo. Okay, that's Phoenicia down here. So we got the boat here. We're going to go past Cyprus right here. This is Phoenicia right down there, okay? Right on the coast. This is a big place in the Old Testament, all right? Keep all this in mind. This is going to be huge, okay? And so once they get here, they're going to basically just do their thing for a minute here. And once they get here, they go to the next part here. I'll go quick. I'll skip. Last week. Just go ahead and go to verse 4, because we got to see what happens in Tyre. Because Tyre is going to be where we have a situation you need to understand what's happening at. Go ahead and read verse 4. And finding disciples, we stayed there 7 days. They told Paul through the Spirit not to go to Jerusalem.
Now remember, what did Paul make clear in his speech that the Spirit had said to him?
Go to Jerusalem.
Go to Jerusalem. To the point that the Spirit puts him in chains and bondage where he's dragging them, and it's not an option. But here the text clearly says that they say the Spirit's saying for you not to go. How did we answer that? Because this is where your apologetics needs to kick in. Because these are those areas where people will say there's mistakes. Is there a mistake? How did we answer that? There's 3 or 4 ways you can, but 2 possibilities. And if you just get the easy one, that's good enough.
Well, my personal opinion is they saw the vision as Paul saw it. But they were concerned for him and said, please don't go. Yes. They saw, very good. They were concerned. That's the key. They would have possibly, what they would have seen is the actual torment like Paul saw. And they said, certainly God doesn't want you to go through this torment. Please don't go, out of concern. As long as you know that it is what they see the Spirit say is you're going to go into bondage and hardship, and they deduce from their own human reasoning and concern that Paul should not go, that's fine. As a matter of fact, that almost seems to play itself out the next time we see that happen as well. But just know that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the Spirit does say not to go, but he means it more metaphorically, and they're taking it literally, and they can only see in part what he's talking about, but Paul can see the overall big picture. That one's a little more complicated, but it's possible as well. Either one works. And as long as you get what Steve said the first one, you were fine and you were good, and we were fine. Eventually, they do let him go, though. Eventually, they go, okay, obviously this is what you want. We will be okay with it. We got to give the Lord's will. It's all about God's will, not about our own. And this is what we see happen here in verse 5 through 6. Read that for us. When we had come to the end of those days, we departed and went on our way, and they all accompanied us with wives and children till we were out of the city, and we knelt down to the shore and prayed. When we had taken our leave of one another, we boarded the ship, and they returned home.
All right, so what we got here is we've got a what? A missication. What's a missication? No, where they have a mission trip to the beach. That's that terminology you get right there. Yes. No, what they have here is another tearful goodbye. They have another tearful goodbye, and these people are heartbroken because they realize Paul's about to go suffer, and it's God's will. They can't get around it. It's just how it is. And he's really made connections with these people. Now keep in mind, we are still in mixed church populations. We're especially going to see that in a minute. When I say that, we got Jews and Gentiles. He is not going to get this reception once we get to Jerusalem. So this is what you're seeing. God is basically building him up and encouraging him to face what he's about to face. So he's letting other people let him know that we love you. We love you. We don't want you to do this. We're concerned about you. Because once he gets to Jerusalem, there'll be none of that. You need to acquiesce to them and they just might kill you in the process. And it is what it is, man. Your fault. There's no love for Paul at all. But here he's getting love and encouragement. I really think the Lord's working on these people to make sure Paul knows this, which is giving him the strength to go face what he has to face. That'll happen a lot to you as well. All right, now verse 7. Let's see here. We are now to verse 7. And in verse 7, we're going to take another little quick sea voyage. Go ahead and read verse 7.
And when we had finished our voyage from Tyre, we came to Ptolemais, whatever, greeted the brethren, and stayed with them one day. Well,
I say another sea voyage. This probably might be a foot voyage here. But yes, this is going to be a short, friendly visit. It's either a sea voyage or a foot voyage. It's debated. Ptolemais. Yeah, very good. Silent P. Very good. So now you've got a short, friendly visit overnight with the brothers. This is a seaport. Now here's the key, guys. Keep this in mind. Every city we are coming to, we are getting closer to Jerusalem. It's paying an ominous tone. It's letting you know something bad's about to happen. And each step we're getting closer is problematic. Now, does anybody know how the church of Ptolemais was founded? Now remember Tyre was either founded by Jesus' own ministry, or when the Jews from Jerusalem were persecuted, they went there. So that's how it was founded. Does anybody know how this church was founded? No, because no one knows. And what this is letting you know is there's a lot of other churches getting founded with other missionaries at work as well. Okay? This is one of these examples. That means that... Yes, sir?
I said Philip probably had a lot to do with it.
We'll get to Philip. We'll get to him. And I've got a theory on that. I will say this. Philip is in beast mode when it comes to founding churches. Yes, sir. And if you want to give anybody credit for founding an unknown church, I would say Philip. That's a very good guess. Because that guy was he was awesome. And we will see him here in a second. But we're going to have a short, friendly visit here. And then with a group, they know they're there. So they're going to get up here. And here we go to Caesarea in verse 8 through 9. And here we're going to see Philip. Verse 8 through 9. Go ahead and read this.
Now on the next day, we who were Paul's companions departed and came to Caesarea, and entered the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. Now this man had 4 virgin daughters who prophesied.
Yes, okay, that's good there. So we have made it to Caesarea Maritima. We've seen this place before. This is roughly 40 miles from our last location. Does anybody remember who this city was? You could say founded by, pretty much built up by, but I would say founded by. Does anybody remember what great architectural building project ruler might build something in this area that built this place?
Something like that. Can't even pronounce the name.
Close. You're going to connect this. This is going to be connected to Herod the Great as far as building goes. And then after this, what we're going to have is, we're going to have these 4 harbors, and once again, a mixed population church. And a mixed population church, we have who? Jews and Gentiles. Keep in mind, they're going to be more receptive of Paul. This will be the second to last time you're really going to see Paul being warmly welcomed. After this, things begin to go down, and it's nailing all here. So we've got the guy that Brother Arnold just mentioned, Philip the Evangelist. This means he was a preacher of the good news of Jesus Christ, and he is similar to what we might call a church planter. And that's why when Brother Arnold said he would guess maybe Philip did it, I'd be fine with that. Because this guy was founding churches left and right. And as a church planter, what his job was to do was to grow out of his job. Which means you go in there, you set it up, you get it growing, and it gets so big it becomes self-sufficient to where you're no longer needed, and you go somewhere else. This is what Philip did. Time and time and time again. Now it's interesting, in non-Christian circles, what evangelist means, Christians made it something, of course, Christianized. We love to do this. But it means the proclamation of Jesus Christ in Christian circles. But in non-Christian circles, it was a proclaimer of oracle messages, and it could be applied to a pagan priest. As a matter of fact, we found some old documents, Stalin Rhodes, that use the term for a proclaimer of pagan oracles. Well, we use it as Christians as a proclaimer of the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so this is what we're seeing him do with it right here. Now, we've seen Philip already. We've seen Philip a couple times already in Acts. What are some of the times we've seen Philip already?
The Ethiopian eunuch.
Yes, sir. That would be the Nubian official. The Nubian official on the road to Gaza in Acts 8. One of the times we see him is mentioned in the description here as well. What is another time we've seen it? Think about early on when we're setting up the... Yeah, it does mention it. Think about early on when we're setting up the... Remember, the apostles, they can't deal with the ins and outs of the church right now. They got to go study and preach. So we got to get somebody in here to take care of other things, put it that way. The widow supplies. What organization or group was set up to make the organization back in Acts 6 to take care of the widow's needs? It more than likely is the prototype for the deaconage. Yes, sir.
7 men.
Yes, sir.
Wait on, and said they wouldn't give up the teachers. They wouldn't, in order for them not to give up preaching, they got somebody to take care of the business of waiting all these complaints they had about wilderness and everything.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I think.
Amen, that's right. So the apostles, so they could do their preaching and their teaching and everything else they had to do, what they're going to have is they're going to get this men of 7 here, and they're going to organize a support ministry for the widows. Okay, we're going to stop a lot of in-church fighting over this. And he's one of the 7. And that probably is the framework for the deaconette, and he's one of those guys. But notice that he is called an evangelist because even more important for his ministerial career was, as you mentioned, the Ethiopian / technically Nubian official that he converts and he translates scripture to. And after this, he carries out an evangelistic missionary journey work through basically old ancient Philistine territory and into Samaria itself, where he inevitably settles down in Caesarea, which this is Samaria basically, which is basically 20 years later from last time we saw him. And he settled down now and he's got a family. And in his family, who particularly is called out?
It's 4 daughters.
His 4 daughters. 4 unmarried or virgin daughters who prophesied. Really, this is more emphasizing their virginity and the fact that they aren't married is why it's doing that, but they are of marriageable age, which could mean they're in their late teens, maybe early 20s. Remember, Bill got married as early as 12 then, but some people think it means they set themselves up to the work of the Lord is why they chose this life, and that's why they did it. Either that, other people think they were just ugly, but we don't know. We're not quite sure. I'm just kidding. I don't know. We don't know what happened there. They just didn't get married, and that has nothing to do with their prophetic gift, by the way. It doesn't support it in any way, but they did prophesy. This is a present participle, implying it was an habitual character, and they exercised the gift of prophecy on a regular basis within the community itself. This seems to make them prophetesses. Okay? There you go. That's one way to say it there. So that makes them that. Does anybody remember in 1 Corinthians 11 what a prophetess had to do in order to prophesy? What was she, as far as any kind of, even as individual or publicly, what would she have to do? She'd have to have something, her head covered. So more than likely they had to have their head covered when they did this. There's a debate on if they just did it individually or in public worship. I see no problem with them doing it in public worship. This whole structure here, it was prophesied that when the Spirit came, your sons and your daughters would be able to do this kind of stuff. The early church emphasized the role of a female as a prophetess. It's something you see around Jesus' birth. Anna, you see it in the Corinthian church. You see it in other places. I think Deborah was considered a prophetess. You see this in other places. It was not unheard of. There's a lot of them, actually. And what they are really is God using a voice. And no, this is not the same as being the pastor. But I do think this gets downplayed sometimes because Paul is very clear that women in the early church prophesied and prayed, and it seems to be saying during the public worship service. So, and there's even many who believe that there's some women who were deacons. That can be debated, of course, but what cannot be debated is that there were female prophetesses, and that is a hardcore Big Daddy spiritual gift. So you've got to be careful when you're downplaying the role of women in God's plan. And they become examples of it. Here, though, it just kind of mentions them, and they don't technically do the prophesying. Someone else does. And this is someone else, another prophet comes into the scene who travels on into town. And one of the reasons it might be him doing this, he might be the old senior level prophet at this point in time. We're not sure. But we have seen him before. Go ahead and read verses 10 through 12. We'll be almost done.
And as we stayed many days, a certain prophet named Agabus came down from Judea. When he had come to us, he took Paul's belt, bound his own hands and feet, and said, "Thus saith the Holy Spirit, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. Now when we heard these things, both we and those from that place pleaded with them not to go up to Jerusalem.
All right, so we've got, while this ministry situation is going on in Caesarea, a prophet named who shows up? Agabus, very good. And he comes from where? Judea, which means he's from Jerusalem. He's from Jerusalem. And now this is the guy we've seen earlier. We saw this guy earlier, what he predicted earlier. He had a huge prediction earlier. What did he do about roughly 15, 20 years earlier? What did he do? He had a huge prediction. In Acts 11, he is the guy who predicted the great famine during the reign of Claudius. Okay? And remember, because he did that, they were able to get relief together and at least stave off some starvation. Okay? And so this is something, this guy is known to predict accurate things. And here we got two things. He acts out his prophecy and he gives a verbal prediction with divine authority. When I say verbal prediction with divine authority, what am I talking about? What formula does he use before he does the prophetic act? And then he says something in the formula that gives it divine authority before he makes a statement. Who does he say? Thus says who? Well, actually, look what it says. Thus says the Holy Spirit. Which is his version of thus saith the Lord. Which is the church's version of when a prophet speaks and it's truly got divine authority, what you're going to see in New Testament times. Thus saith the Lord was used 322 times, if not more, in the Old Testament by the prophets, particularly by Isaiah 26 times, Jeremiah 64 times, and Ezekiel 126 times. So thus saith the Lord was huge, and if you said it, you were saying directly, this is what God says. So he's giving it divine authority. This is not my idea. This is what God clearly says. And he's saying it with divine authority. He then acts out. Remember, this is an active parable, an active prophetic sign. Remember, several Old Testament prophets would do this where their actions symbolize the verbal prophecy itself. Isaiah did it. Jeremiah did it. Ezekiel did it. Jesus does it in Passion Week when he clears the temple, predicting the temple's destruction. You see this happen where someone acts out what they're saying and they do it in a vivid manner that gets your attention. And that's all part of the reason here. What does he do? It says here, Agabus stands up. He approaches Paul. He takes Paul's belt. I know so many translations have girdle, and I don't mind that translation, but what it is a long band or sash that you wrap several times around your waist. Okay? Within this, it can also hold a pouch. So many people think that this belt sash cord is actually what was being used to hold the pouch that had the Jerusalem money bag, which would also be symbolic in itself. Okay? So he takes this belt of Paul's, and Agabus does what? He ties his own feet and his own hands. And then he gets down and he crouches down and kind of gets in this hog-tie position and uses his teeth to finish the job out. So he is totally bound. And then he utters the prophecy. Thus saith the Holy Spirit. The man who owns this belt is who this is going to happen to. And who owned that belt? Paul. And so what he's saying, Agabus tying himself with Paul's belt, what he's saying is the Jews are going to bind Paul, imprison him, and hand him over to the Gentiles to be tried in court and possibly sentenced to death. Now, there's a little bit to that, but for now what I want you to see, what he does not say. Unlike the believers in Tyre who say, this is God saying not to go. Agabus, under the inspiration of the Spirit, clearly with divine authority, never gives a prohibition. He just says, here's what's going to happen. He does not get involved. Now, he will get involved in a minute very similarly, but he does not. And so in this one right here, we know that the Holy Spirit is not prohibiting because Agabus doesn't say it, although in verse 12 they seem to miss that. Now, what actually ends up happening, we see in Acts 21, 27 through 33, the Jews don't technically hand him over, but they beat the snot mob mentality style, and in order to save his life, the Romans intervene and arrest him. So, it is technically the Jews' fault that Paul gets arrested. Okay? And it's the basic thrust that is mattering, not the technical details. And so the Jews are responsible for his arrest? Yes. Does he get arrested by the Gentiles? Yes. So it's an overall big picture of him getting arrested one way or another. The Jews are going to be involved and they're going to get him to the Gentiles, and kind of a backdoor method. That is what happened. There will be some people that say he gets this wrong. No, because it's the basic thrust you're looking for in these type prophecies, not all the technical details. That's when I tell you, when you look at Revelation and we read John's prophecies, don't go try to find Saddam Hussein in there or Joseph Stalin in there. You're looking at the overall big picture. That's how prophetic symbolism works. The overall big picture. And that's what happens right here. There's no error in it. It's just capturing the basic thrust that he will be handed over and the Jews will be responsible for it. Okay? Now remember the reaction in verse 12 again, because remember, although he does not give a prohibition, how does everybody there act? Read verse 12 for us one more time.
Now when we heard these things, both we and those from the place pleaded with him not to go up to Jerusalem.
We heard. Okay, we got a we passage, which means who's all there right now?
Luke.
You got Luke. Luke's in the group, and you got the other traveling missionary team of Paul's. So you've got the believers at Caesarea, and you got Paul's own traveling missionary team saying what? Don't go. Don't do it. And they take the prophecy either, we can say out of concern, but they seem to interpret Agabus' prophecy as God not wanting Paul to go to Jerusalem. Maybe they're just overwhelmed with concern. I really can't say at this point, but they're telling him not to go. And they're saying, they're deducing from this prophecy. As a matter of fact, urging him is pleading with him for some time in verse 12, imperfect. In verse 13, they do so through continuous weeping. And then in verse 14, they're trying to dissuade him over and over again. But Paul will not do what? Be persuaded. And so now we're going to see this happen in verse 13 and 14. Read that for us.
Then Paul answered, "What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." So when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, "The will of the Lord be done."
We've got a twofold response here, if you really want to summarize it. We have Paul going, your reaction is greatly emotionally making me react. Your reaction is great. Your grief is grieving me. I think some of your translations even have, "You're breaking my heart." That's a very good translation. If any of your translations have, that's a very good translation. Because what he's saying is, how you're acting with emotion is hurting my emotions and just tearing them to shreds. Emotionally distraught right here, okay? But, as much as I'm admitting that's the case, and you're making it hard on me to say this, you're really not, because here's the deal. I'm going no matter what, no matter how much you beg me, I'm still going. That's what he says right here. He goes, emphatically, he asserts that I'm ready and willing to go and die if necessary for the cause of Christ. If it be God's will, and I know it's God's will. Now remember, there are times he runs from trouble. He runs from harm, and he escapes from it. But there are other times, like this one here, he runs headlong straight into it. So this is one of these times he knew it was God's will for him to suffer. So then the believers acquiesce, and they recognize that Paul is not only determined to go, but it's truly the Lord's will that Paul suffer. Once again, is it God's will you suffer? It very well could be. It very well, really could be for the overall big picture that's going to take place in God's plan for the kingdom advancement. That's part of it, and that still gets missed a lot today. Now we're going to go to Jerusalem. Here we got to make one more stop. Actually, we're going to stop either in Jerusalem or a suburb, one of the two. One more quick stop off here in verse 15 and 16.
And after those days we packed and went up to Jerusalem. Also some of the disciples from Caesarea went with us and brought with them a certain Manson of Cyprus, an early disciple with whom we were to lodge.
Manason. Now don't worry, you did great. Hey, don't worry. I listen to lectures and all the time with this, and I still butcher them. Manason. Yeah, that's one of those fun names to say. Of Cyprus. Remember, Cyprus is right here. He was from that island right over here. Okay, that's where he is from. Now, this would have taken. If they went on foot, the Caesarea Jerusalem would have taken about 4 days. There are some who theorize they've got horses. Schnabel totally dismisses that and says, listen, you've got a group of, 8 or more, I think 12 is what he said, but anyway, you got a bigger group here. You can't afford to have that many horses. Horses weren't cheap, and they didn't have 12 available horses right then. So he throws that out of the water and says they definitely would have walked, which would have made it a 4-day trip. They then get, inevitably, to Manason of Cyprus, who was an early disciple. Now, Manason is going to be interesting himself because, although he is from Cyprus, he now lives in or near Jerusalem. Okay? It's difficult to tell how that's worded right there. But what is important is, he is one of the early disciples, which could mean one of two things. What do you think one of the things might mean?
He's an early convert.
That's when we look at, when we say early converts, that actually could be right, even that, but how early could we be going?
Back to when Jesus.
Back to Jesus' earthly ministry. Yes. Many people think that this guy goes all the way back to Jesus' public ministry, and he's part of the 120 from Acts 1:15. There are even some people who think Luke interviews this guy to get information for his gospel. Okay? We don't know that for certain, but that's possible. Or it's talking about the fact that very shortly after the resurrection, he gets converted one way or another. He's been around for a long time during all this, and Luke might be interviewing him, get information for Acts as well. He has been around for a long time watching this Christian thing at work. So you know Brother Luke, who's taking all the notes at this point in time, is ecstatic to meet this guy. And so, you know, and it's very possible that people in the group know him from Acts 11:20 as well. So he is very possible of that. Now we finally get to Jerusalem. We will be done. Verse 17.
And when we had come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly.
And that is just a quick reminder that things are going to go real bad real fast. Because the very next day, it's not that good anymore. We don't even know who's in this group, okay? We do know, and pretty much everybody's unanimous, well, most people are, and I think it's right. We are actually know the exact date, at least month and year. May AD 57, or for you guys who hear it when I say it the proper way, 57 AD, okay? 057 AD is where we are, and we're in May, possibly May 29th. We're at Pentecost, and this is a time that you've got to keep in mind. He is waltzing into a shark pit, a snake pit, whatever you want to say. I'll say identity at this point, because he's waltzing in to a Jerusalem that has just got nothing but political unrest at this point in time. We are about 9 years away from the Jerusalem Wars. And anytime you have massive wars like this, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are catalysts that begin to get started. We are in the catalyst period right now. And what this is beginning to show you is why in AD 66, the Jews are going to revolt against the Romans, and why inevitably in AD 70, or 70 AD for those like the way, the Romans destroy the temple. Okay? This is a catalyst for all that. It is a very tense Jerusalem. It is a very, very much place of social unrest. And although Paul at this point is welcomed warmly initially, notice it doesn't say who welcomes him, just vaguely believers do. So some believers welcomed him, and that's about as good as he's going to get. Maybe it's a delegation from the Church of Jerusalem, we don't know. But notice what it doesn't say, okay? Because we know the next day there's going to be mixed reviews about meeting him. Notice what doesn't get mentioned at all there, nor through anything else. What was his reason to go to Jerusalem? What's he taking?
He's taking the money.
Yeah, it never gets mentioned, ever. Not once does it ever get mentioned. Not once does it ever get mentioned. And there's a few ways to view this. One of the ways is the Jerusalem church received mixed reviews because of the tension going on between Gentiles and Jews at that time. And so it's very possible he brings it there, and the elders are like, should we take this? You know, we don't know. But it's also very possible, and this is what Schnabel thinks, and I think this is a very good argument as well, that although they went to take this relief fund, when all the other stuff happens that's going to happen, it overshadows that little bitty relief fund when Paul's ministry, basically, his missionary work comes to an end for a while right here. So the events that happen overshadow the reason for going, and that's very possible while Luke doesn't mention it as well. Now this is where we will stop and pick back up all in the action either Sunday night or next Wednesday, not sure. All right, any questions? No questions.
When you said when the daughters or the early ones would prophesy, you said they would have their hair cut. Are you talking about the face would be totally covered, or just like the Muslims were a head?
At the very least, like the Muslims with the head covering. But everybody did the Middle East back then. And so, you know, my thing was, well, there's some symbolism to that as well about the authoritative structure, and this is where we're getting into Pauline theology. But yeah, we'll say that. Their heads were covered at the very least, like you'd see a Muslim today, or like any female pretty much in the Middle East today. Yeah. There are even some Christians now who try to argue for head coverings for women. No, I totally disagree with it, but you know, it was a thing, but that was the culture then. Because the angels, you got to cover your head, which that gets into my Genesis 6 stuff. Anyway, that's the whole thing. Yeah. Anyway, what does that say, Beth? You asked me what I say? Yeah, something like that. Something like that. There we go. Good job. Way to pay attention. All right, now, any other questions? Very good question, Steve. Any other questions? All right. If there's nothing else, let's